Hi, it's Natalie, and I am here today with my good friend, Heidi Stone, who is a longtime homeschool teacher. Hi, Heidi.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thank you. So, there are a lot of people that are deciding whether or not they should homeschool this year. And so, I wanted to talk to you and see if you could provide maybe a little bit of insight into the whole process. So, how do you decide to homeschool?
Well, a lot of people are deciding for a lot of reasons to homeschool right now. And our family actually started homeschooling at the very beginning. So some people know that they want to homeschool as soon as they have children. I actually never had that ambition. I started homeschooling kind of out of, I hate to say desperation, but it was sort of our only option. We weren't really thrilled with the public school where we were living, and we couldn't afford the private school. And so we kind of wound up homeschooling by default. But we've really fallen in love with it. And I've met a lot of people that homeschool for a lot of different reasons, some of it being having to do with where they live, some of it having to do with just their circumstances. People are single parenting, or they're dealing with a loved one who's struggling. There's a lot of reasons that people homeschool. And obviously this year we have kind of a unique situation where people are trying to avoid maybe what they don't feel is the best option for their child in the traditional school setting.
So, Heidi, how many kids do you have and how old are they? And then how long have you been homeschooling?
So we have 6 children. They are about every other year from 7 to 15. So do that math. And we've been homeschooling since the very beginning. So we're actually going into our 11th homeschooling there. We just started actually this last week. We started our 11th year.
Wow, that is amazing. All right, so you decide to homeschool, and then what happens? What comes next, Heidi?
So homeschooling really varies a lot by state. And so I live in Indiana, and our homeschool laws are very, very lax here. But there are some states that have quite a bit more stringent laws. And then there's a lot of states just kind of in the middle. So what I usually tell people when they're first getting started is if you don't know anything about your homeschool state laws, the easiest place that I know to go is the HSLDA website. That's the Homeschool Legal Defense something association, and they have a lot of resources available. I know that you can pay monthly to subscribe to their legal resources, but they have a lot just on their website available, and they have tons of information about how to actually transition your child from another school or just getting started. All the details about what your state would require as far as schooling, number of days, number of hours, different subjects, and things like that. So as far as how to get started, the first step would be if you don't have that under your belt, take care of that so that you're making sure you're following the legal requirements to get going with school.
All right, so you figure out what your state requirements are, you've got your state requirements down, and then how do you figure out what to teach? Like where do you start with curriculum and like age ranges, and how do you get started as far as the day-to-day of it?
Well, I think a lot of people, because of their unique situations, approach homeschooling from different perspectives. So some people prefer to do what is kind of more like school at home. And so there's different options available for that. Some people opt to do like a K-12 program, which is your state sponsored curriculum that you would have in public school. You're just doing it from home. Some people opt to do an online curriculum, which is a very easy way to get started. You can hop online and look for one of those options, and they will basically have everything you need all put together into one package. And so that's an easy way to get moving, just to get an idea of what your child needs, because it's all set up for them. There's similar programs that are like that are not online, but you can purchase maybe a DVD set or something like that. And then you have those of us like me who kind of are control freaks, and we just want to sort of piece everything together. So the basics, of course, when your kids are young, is to get them to learn to read and to do math. And once you have those things established, you can really build on that however you want. But of course, following your state guidelines. So here in Indiana, where we're pretty laid back, I really focus a lot on those things as we're first getting started, and then build on from there. And we don't really have specific requirements until our kids reach high school. So that does vary by state. But The very first thing I would say to do outside of curriculum is actually to determine what your family's goals are. Because everyone does have a different situation, they also have a different set of goals. So our goals are actually more relationship focused in our house rather than academics focused, whereas some people care really strongly about academics, and that's just not something that we've put quite as much of a emphasis on in our home. But I would definitely consider that and take a look at what the dynamics are for your family and what the goals would be, and then invite your kids in to actually help you, if they're old enough, help you kind of create a curriculum that they're going to enjoy. Because the beautiful thing about homeschooling is that there is so much freedom in that. And when your kids are enjoying what they're doing, they learn so much better. So when they have a vested interest in things, it's kind of like how people say, invite your toddlers in to help you cook and they'll eat more vegetables. Kind of that same idea comes along with school. So even if your child is 5 or 6 or 7, it's okay for you to say, hey, is there anything you want to learn about this week or this year? And just invite them in. And that gives them a little bit of control too. So as far as how to get started, it really sort of depends on your approach and what your goals are and what you're looking for. But if you really are feeling hesitant, one of those all-in-one packages is probably going to be the best way for you to get started.
How do you teach subjects that you don't know? Like if your kid is starting to do science and you're not a science person, how do you teach them science?
It's like you know me because I'm not a science person. In fact, you do know me. And don't even like science. So this is a great question for me. So the beautiful thing about having access to all the technology that we have now is that you can literally find anything on the internet. Now that's a danger as well. So of course, monitor your kids. But the thing about especially things like science and history is that there is so much available for free. So pair that with the library, and there's really nothing you can't learn. Now, again, you are going to be needing to be a little bit more intentional about that. It's not quite the same as maybe just plugging into a course, which you can do, but there are so many resources available between the library and documentaries, and just YouTube has so much. So we definitely use a lot of those things. But if you're struggling, there are definitely places where you can go online and just kind of like I mentioned earlier, subscribe to a course. So if your kids are really interested in a particular subject and you have no knowledge of it, I would just look for a place, and I would ask people for recommendations where you can get them set up with a teacher who has that knowledge. If that's not something that you can budget for or fit in, then I would go the library route, or we actually subscribe to a documentary only streaming service called Curiosity Stream. It's like $20 a year and it's all documentaries. And that has been a nice resource for us as well, because there's just so much on it, and it's all relatively safe for my kids to just kind of browse. And that helps a lot too. We just found some other resources on YouTube that have been really fun for us. So with things like science, I mean, you can start with a basic textbook and kind of build on top of that. One thing about science to remember is that there are constantly new discoveries coming. So it's a subject that's not maybe quite as flat as math. Math is kind of math and that's that. But science is always changing. And so it's important to remember that as you're pursuing something like higher level science. But the basics, they pretty much have down. Although when I was a kid, Pluto was a planet. So I guess that's not always true. But yeah, so there's a lot of resources out there for things like that. Right now, one of the things that we're looking into for my older kids is actually foreign language, because neither my husband nor I speak a foreign language with any level of fluency. And so I know that we're going to need to find something that is really built in with a teacher that is a fluent Spanish speaker, if that's the route they want to go. So, that's something we're looking at and considering options, but there really are a lot of things that you can pursue that cost less than that. It just might take a little bit more creativity to find it.
So what is your typical day like? When are you teaching? How long are you teaching? Are you teaching them all together? How does your day kind of break down?
Well, one of the things that I was really intentional about from the very beginning, and this might be different as you're just getting started, depending on your kids' ages. But that was to make my children as independent as possible, as early as possible. And some of that is that I really just want my children to learn to be independent as they grow into adulthood. But the other part of that is that it's actually really good for them, and it's really good for me because I only have so much time, and it's valuable for them to learn how to do that. So my day kind of starts out with the kids getting up. I don't typically wake my kids up unless we need to be somewhere. So they kind of sleep in, and I get to work a little bit. I work from home, so I do some work in the morning. The kids get up, they make themselves breakfast, and then I yell at them to clean up the kitchen. And when that's done, we kind of move into the rest of the day. And I kind of act for the morning as I don't want to say a tutor, but kind of my kids will bring me their questions as they get to them. And at this point, most of my kids are reading, so they can do a lot of their work on their own. And then as we move into the afternoon is when we do things as more of a family. Now, my older kids at this point are doing a lot of their schoolwork by themselves or together with just between the two of them. And I work more with my younger four at this point, but I've always sort of paired off my kids. So that's one perk, I guess, to having so many is that I sort of have like a set of older kids and then a set of middle kids and a set of younger kids. And so as I've chosen the curriculum for those ages, I tend to pair that. So that helps me a lot. And I've chosen curriculum on purpose that is fairly easy to do as a group for a wide range of ages, but then kind of cater the involvement after that. And so, for example, with our science that we're going through this year, I'm doing science all together with my four younger kids. So they're ages 7 to 12. And after the science lesson is over, typically my younger two kids will just draw a picture or they'll maybe describe the experiment just very in a short kind of way. And my older kids might do a little bit more research on the topic, or they might expound on what we learned a little bit and write that in their notebook. So I've kind of chosen things that way on purpose. So we've sort of done that as a pretty basic routine. I'm here in the morning. They come to me with their questions, but the afternoon is when I tend to do a lot more one-on-one or one-on-four with the kids. And then sometimes we'll read in the afternoon. Reading aloud is something that I never did until a couple years ago. I kind of thought, why would my older kids that can read want me to read to them?
Yeah.
But then I realized that my senior year of high school, I had a speech class and my teacher would read to us in class, and it was my favorite.
Oh.
So a couple of years ago, we started doing read alouds, and honestly, everybody in our family loves it. It's one of our very favorite things that we do. So sometimes we'll do that in the afternoon. And then if the kids have anything left over, they can kind of wrap that up when we're done. The younger kids really don't have that many hours of schoolwork. I mean, elementary kids really do not need more than an hour or maybe two of schoolwork, depending on their age and their abilities. So by the time we get finished with our group activities in the afternoon, they're usually free to go play, put away their schoolwork and carry on with whatever they have left. And then the oldest kids will tend to kind of wrap things up on the computer doing their research or whatever. So that's kind of how our day flows. And then we just move into dinner, and we don't do evening, like we don't have evening homework. That's the benefit to being home all day. And so our evenings are just very focused on family.
So you touched on this a little bit. How long are you typically schooling the kids in a school setting?
I've seen some charts. I've never really taken the time, honestly, to go over that very carefully. And because I do things sort of in groups, it's not necessarily going to align specifically all the time with kind of how we do things. But as a general sense, I would say early elementary takes maybe an hour at the most. And some of that time they're just listening to me read. Upper elementary, 2 to 3 hours. Middle school, probably 3 to 4. And then high school, depending on how much your kids are involved in, 4 to 6, I would say. Again, that has to do with the child and what they're doing. One of my kids is an overachiever, and so she will work a very long time on something that is seemingly very simple to me. And then I have other kids who are not overachievers who will take the fastest route every time. So there's a little bit of variance there with the kids, but overall, I mean, really, the time it takes to do the actual schoolwork is so short compared to what they might experience in the classroom, simply because there's fewer kids, there's more one-on-one time, and there's not all the, between classes and all of that involved. And I guess it sort of depends what you count as school as well, because our kids are very active around the house. They help with a lot of the cleaning, they do their own laundry, they do a lot of the cooking, and so some of that actually I would call education. So it depends what you're including in your education. But if you're just talking about book work or formal work, yeah, I would not say ever in high school it would be beyond 5 or 6 hours unless your kids were really pushing it.
When do you do your normal everyday mom life of laundry and dishes and, all the things that us moms busy ourselves with all day?
Well, I kind of did already mention that my kids help with a lot of that. And I sometimes like to think of our family as functioning a little bit like how I imagine living on a farm might be. And when I say that, I don't mean that we have a lot of animals, although we do have chickens now. But when I say that, I mean that in my mind, people who live on a farm are of the understanding that we are a family and we work together to make this happen. And so our kids know that my husband is working and mom has to work during the day as well. And so they kind of help pick up the slack with a lot of those things. Now, if you're just brand new coming into this, I recognize that you are going to need to figure out what works for you. Your kids are not going to come home and immediately start washing the dishes if that's not part of their routine, or start doing their laundry if that's not something they've done before. So a lot of that has been years of training. So I recognize that. But I do try to get up early, which means I try to go to bed fairly early. My husband and I usually are in bed by 10. And then my alarm goes off at 5. And so I will get up in the morning. I do reading. Sometimes I do a little bit of work. If I have laundry, we have a chore chart and the kids help with a lot of things like dishes and cleaning and that sort of thing. So what I tend to do is go behind and kind of like make it look right a lot of times. So less and less as they get older, but that really, really takes a lot off of me. But when my kids were little, we did something that I found really helpful, and that was to have a quiet time. So even after my kids stopped napping, which was far too early, we still had a quiet time in the afternoon. So they would have a certain period of time that they would sit in their room and read or do something quiet. And they just needed to stay in their room or in their bed or however we had it set up at the time. And that gave me freedom to do whatever needed to be done. So sometimes I just sat down and watched TV. And sometimes I would wash the dishes or start the laundry or things like that. So if your kids are younger, that's an option. That might take a little training if they're not used to doing that, but just being able to say, this is time for you to sit here and do something quiet, and mommy's going to go do this. So it sort of depends what stage you're in, but that really does pay off in the long run, helping your kids learn how to do a lot of those things around the house.
Yeah, it sounds like it. The ever popular question, if the kids are at home all day, how do you get them socialized?
Yeah, it's funny. I don't run into a lot of people anymore that really ask me this question. I think maybe it's died down a little bit. Maybe that's just my circle. But so the standard response is if you consider what socialization looks like at school, there's really not a lot of socialization going on. When I was a kid, I remember one year that we were not allowed to even talk during lunch until we had finished our food. It was very rush, get to class, don't talk during class. And so I don't really remember a lot of that taking place during the school day. Now, we did have conversation before and after school. So, I understand that kids are hanging out with their friends. But the idea of socialization is really an interesting one. And if you consider how the school systems are typically set up, unless your kids attend a really small school where there's a wide range of ages, what usually is happening in the school is that when we refer to socialization, we're talking about maybe a group of 13 to 14-year-olds that are hanging out and socializing. And there's certainly nothing wrong with that. And my kids have lots of friends that are the same ages as them. But one of the things that I love about homeschooling is that we have the freedom to actually pursue relationships with all different ages. And my kids have a lot of value in that. They see a lot of value in being able to relate to older people and younger people. Being able to carry on a conversation with other people as we're out is really important for me to know that they can do. So, for example, when we go to the grocery store, they see me interacting in a regular adult to adult way, which is what they will eventually become, adults, hopefully. Um, they see me interacting, and then we are able to use that as a teaching opportunity. So, for a couple weeks ago, I took my oldest, 15, to the grocery store with me, and when I go to the grocery store, I always try to use someone's name if it's written on their name tag, because I know that people feel important when you use their name. And there's somebody there that is often there when I bag my groceries. And I said, "Hey, Mike, how are you doing today?" And, so we had just a short conversation. And when we left, my son said something to me about how I must know everybody at the store. And I think I had said somebody else's name as well, maybe the cashier. And I just was able to explain to him in that moment that no, I don't actually know everyone at the store, but people at the store wear name tags, and it allows me to make them feel important by having a conversation and using their name. So that's just one example, but those are the kinds of things that actually teach our kids what real socialization looks like in the real world. Like once they get out of school and they're going to have to interact with other people of different ages, that's actual socialization. So certainly we are not home 24/7. We go to the library, we go to museums, we go to the grocery store, post office, bank, whatever. And that's just the errands portion. That's just the field trip kind of formal stuff. But of course, my kids have friends. They have friends at church. Our kids aren't in extracurriculars right now, but obviously that is a big avenue for kids to pursue their interests and socialize in that way. So in many areas, actually, your kids can still participate in the extracurriculars through the school district. In certain cases, they might need to be enrolled in maybe one subject or maybe not. It just depends where you live. But that's often available for kids today as well. So socialization is not something that I put any time into worrying about. I knew plenty of kids that were super strange when I was growing up, and they went to school with me. So just because your kids are weird doesn't mean they're homeschooled, and just because they're homeschooled doesn't mean they're going to be weird.
Is there any parting wisdom that you would like to give us, a wise homeschooling one?
Well, I would just, I guess, remind you that your decision does not have to be permanent. So, you can try this out, and if in a semester or a quarter it's just not working for anyone in your family, then you can switch it up. You can always try something different. And that goes for any school system. That goes for any style of education. Nothing has to be permanent. So, don't be paralyzed by the details and think that you just can't do it because you don't have everything in order. I assure you, I do not have everything in order either. So I would just encourage you to think about that, recognize that nothing is going to be long-term unless you want it to be long-term. And also keep in mind that whatever your education choice is, it shouldn't really be just for you or just for your kids. You exist as a family, and so I encourage people to really consider what is best for the family. And I know that sometimes that's hard, and we do have to kind of weigh, which priorities are going to need to take precedence, but it is really crucial, especially during this season where there's a lot of emotions running high. And it's possible that even if you have a really strong desire to homeschool, if you're dealing with some really, really hard emotions, it might not be the best choice for you. Or if your kids are dealing with some really hard emotions, it might be what you need to do. So I guess I would take those things into consideration. And then whenever you make your decision, I want you to remember this phrase. If anyone asks you why you're homeschooling right now, or why you're not homeschooling right now, why you're sending your kids anywhere, all you need to say is, this is the best decision for our family in this season. And that is such a lovely way of letting people know that this is what you've decided, and you don't really need their opinion or their um, applaud. You don't really need anything from them, but this is what you've done and you've thought through it, and this is what your family believes is best. So I encourage people to use a phrase similar to that, because sometimes we do run into, often it's family members that just don't support us no matter what that decision is. And so just be confident in whatever the decision is that you make for your family.
That is such great advice. I love that. Thank you so much, Heidi, for sharing all of your wisdom with us and for chatting with me today. And where can people find out more about you?
Well, I blog at heidi-stone.com, or I'm on Instagram at Heidi Stone. So either one of those places would be great. I do have a lot about homeschooling, especially right now. A lot of people are asking questions, so you might see a lot of that as you are getting going there. But I do also talk about kind of homesteading and just some family things, marriage and stuff like that. But homeschooling is kind of the focus right now.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Heidi.
You're welcome. Thank you.